one's here. Did it make it to noise? Not yet.
Or Fennec, but no, yeah, it's here.
Okay, roll call show. All counselors are present. We're moving on to the FY21 municipal budget discussion. We start with public safety today. So I don't know who gets to start out.
Josh is responsible for managing the public safety budget. And I think we set it up for him to give an overview, or was I doing that one?
No, would it be, oh no, I can do it. I can do it. And then maybe Jeff could jump in when it comes to Arlene.
Okay. I'm assuming, yeah, there he is.
Is he here?
Even dressed up.
Darn it.
Josh, do you, I have a question about the narrative. Do we want to start with the narrative, or do you want to start with the money amount, the dollar amounts?
What I've asked staff to do this time, because it became apparent that we have some folks listening into our budget workshops that really don't have the background that council has. And so a lot of the questions that they were posing on Facebook showed me that they really didn't understand what the department's responsibilities were. So I've asked each chief to very briefly and at the highest level, just give a very brief overview of the department. And then we can take it however you wish to do it. And I would think starting with the narrative sounds like a great idea, but go ahead, Chief.
Okay, thank you.
So for the police department's administrative assistant, Jeff is the face when people come into the building. She's going to answer all the phone calls and route them where they need to go. She is just a jack of all trades. She handles all of our concealed weapons permits applications all the way through. She manages the parking ticket program, which is online, paid through the state. So she manages making sure that that's up to date, that notices go out for overdue parking tickets. She manages all of our kind of the internal note-taking and paperwork filing. She manages the court cases that are going down to the district attorney's office, making sure that they're uploaded to the system. So she kind of manages all the behind-the-scenes data and records management items, and has taken on over the years kind of an additional role as a child seat, both distribution center and installation. So people come in when they have a child seat, a child that they need a seat installed for. She does the installation. She's certified by the state. It isn't as simple as it sounds. It's actually far harder than it sounds. And she also distributes those for the state to people who need them. So that's a kind of an added role that she plays, in addition to an added role as an instructor in our rape aggression defense training for women. So she goes above and beyond what her traditional role would be, which is busy enough, and kind of adds in the community service aspect of it.
And I would just add, she also does some grant administration for me and some contract administration for me.
And does some fill in for the town office as well when they are short-staffed. Jeff can certainly speak to Arlene's role.
Yeah, so Arlene is kind of our version of Jess, in regards to taking care of paperwork, fielding phone calls when they come in. She's just now getting started on data collection for us, which was really inadequate, I guess is a good way to put it. She's taking over some of the billing. We rely heavily on the shift officers to fill some of the lower level roles, if you will, as far as vehicle maintenance and scheduling things. And she's really a conduit, if you will, for the public to reach out to those people. She's able to field phone calls, take notes. She's able to give feedback back to the vendors or whoever it is that may be calling them. In addition to all that, she's still filling her primary role, which is to support fire prevention. That is helping Rob do code research. That's crafting letters. That's scheduling appointments, making sure we're on track, meeting our inspection periods for when we need to inspect things. She also fields calls for Rob. And she does a lot of other ancillary things around here that aren't completely solidified yet for what that role would be. So we call her an admin support person, admin person. I would like to think of her as like a fire and EMS support specialist, if you will. She's able to cover all of the functions that we provide and provide technical or logistical support for those functions to make sure we're doing what we need to do. So.
Can you do me a favor? Sure. Where's Megan? She's not at her house. Can you go come in and ask?
Megan's at you.
I'm at my house. I'm just in a meeting. No one else is home. I can run downstairs later.
Don't worry about it.
Tom, unmute.
Yeah. The police officer is here delivering material and wants to know where Megan is. Captain Merrill can't find her.
Can he just leave it in the door? If he just leaves it in her door, she'll get it when she can.
Is she at home?
Yeah.
Okay.
All right.
She's home, just in the door. Hey, thanks a lot.
No problem. Good luck.
Yeah.
Okay, so not to interrupt Jeff or Josh on.
I think we're ready to open it up to council at this point, right? Questions about public safety administration?
Yep. So why don't we have council talk about the narrative first if they had any questions, and we'll go to the budget part.
I just had one, and it was about the Penobscot Regional Communications Center, wherever you guys are.
Sure.
It says, which is a burden, essentially being asked to be message takers for the department personnel. My question was, how often does this happen?
That's a great question. It's any time that takes a day off or has a vacation or
It's over
is
in
helping town office.
Do you have like how many days? Like, could you have a quantity, like a number?
Well, I would bet she's
A
going
rough guess, I guess.
a number of days. Let's go with probably 2 to 3 weeks total if she's going to take vacation time, and then if you add in times that she's just out at vacation or out at appointments or helping with the town office. So a significant, in my view, a significant amount of time to put that burden on the
I'm gonna go get my packet now.
Is there any?
Josh, that's not just, oh, I'm sorry, Josh, that's not just for you, that's for fire as well. If she's not in that office, we don't have Arlene set up to be able to do that just yet. So PRCC receives business calls for us as well and has to transfer them over. So whatever Josh put out for time, there would be additional volume for fire as well. Sorry to jump in there, I apologize.
That's good.
Is there a reason they don't go to the town office?
You would think that might be intuitive, but the calls, no, they are routed at that point, and maybe that's something we could look into with Jeff, but they're routed, when she leaves every night, they're automatically routed to regional. So I think that anytime she's not here, it stays on that routing system to go to regional.
And I think the problem with that is if it routed over to the town office and nobody picked it up, instead of making its way to regional, it would get stuck in our tree, Cindy. Yeah. I think there was a time when we had her bring her phone over if she was going to be there for the day, Josh, and then we just got overwhelmed with the front desk.
Right, and there's a snafu with that, just that system to be able to order with the phone over.
So is there a proposed solution for this? It seems like overall everything is perfectly manageable until it's not. And then it's not, right? Which is the issue. But we just don't, so what's the trade-off? What's the balance on that? I'm looking for a proposed solution here.
Well, we talked about a renovation of the public safety building someday. That would kind of give Arlene the same access to the same phone lines and have her, so that hopefully one would be there when one wasn't.
So-
Go ahead, Sylvie.
So the recabling program, that is the recabling project that is in the capital budget for this year coming up for public safety should help with some of that. But the other piece is simply trying to just bring people online. I think at this point, not to throw Josh under the bus, but I'm okay with the unfairness of what we do to regional dispatch, as long as we make every effort that we can that is reasonable to reduce those. And trying to change our technology a little bit to allow Arlene to pick up that slack, I think will improve that situation. I guess that my perspective is just that, you know, we are stretched. And I think when I read that narrative, I was reading more about, we don't want to reduce any of that time. Am I right, Josh, or am I misunderstanding?
No, certainly that's correct.
So it's manageable where it is?
Yeah, we haven't received a complaint from regional recently, but when that's used is when we receive the complaints that that's not typically their role.
Yeah.
Burdens their system at that point.
Yep.
I think it sounds like we're making steps in the right direction. I don't have a problem with it.
Yes.
Sophie,
Yes.
the narrative on salary for this individual,
Yep.
it talked about the 50-50 split between public safety and community development and how that's changing. Can you
Yep.
just speak a little bit to that?
Sure. So when we originally brought this position on last year, it was split with 50% to public public safety, and the other 50% was split in the community development budget line. We, when the person that was initially hired to take this position elected to, it wasn't a fit, and they elected to go someplace else. When we hired it, we did a lot of internal review, and we had just gotten done with Jeff talking about staffing concerns and the life safety program in particular. So what we decided at that point was, instead of having 50% of her time allocated to community development, the assessor and community development could work with one admin, and we moved all of the second person over to fire to support this work, because we were seeing some real issues when you've got captains that are on every third day. We were having some issues with continuity in the fire department. We wanted to get Rob out more in inspections and potentially increase the number of inspections that we were doing, which we did with the fraternities. So he really needed some support to make sure that the documents were flowing at the same rate of his inspections. So that is what's happening here. No increase in people, no increase in wage, just an increase in the split between departments.
And so the decrease will be reflected on the economic development side.
Yeah, you'll see some of that there, most of that there. It's broken up between code enforcement, economic development, assessing, which you saw a little bit of when we met last week, and planning.
And does this position also help with the billing, getting bills out?
So we have a third party billing agent, which we want because it helps us with some of the HIPAA compliance issues. She assists with tracking down reports though. So when there are issues, she and Jeff are working with Connie on those. And more importantly, as it was set up before, if somebody had a problem, the only person for them to talk with was the fire chief. Even if it was do I send this bill here or do I send it someplace else? And it was really backing up what the chief could spend his time on. And when that got backed up, it meant I got backed up because they would then come to me. And what I've noticed is having that administrative support, just like Nancy does for me, she facilitates an awful lot of those small questions through the process. She has a lot of those answers already.
So Sophie, I only have one thing, and this doesn't need to be answered right now, just going forward when we go into the public services sector of it. I was trying to kind of like navigate when we were saying things from the development side was going over, switching over, and I could really see clearly money's being removed from salaries or whatever. And then I got to the public services side, and their economic development actually went up 24,000, and it doesn't really have an explanation. So when we get to that point, if you could have an explanation for me why it's
Look at Parks and I can absolutely.
Agreed.
Okay.
Thank you, Terry, for bringing that up. I had a similar kind of thing. Like I came up with 13,000 to this 18,000, and I think you mentioned assessment from last week, which I missed. Sorry about that again. Thanks.
So do you want the answer next time when we do public services, or do you want?
Yeah, answer next time is fine, I think.
Okay, thanks.
Anyone else have any questions on the public administration person, safety administration? No, I'm getting head nods no. So I guess we will move on to police then.
Josh, you want to unmute?
It did that on its own. I don't really, the phone's smarter than I am. It just muted me. So I will do the same thing I just did to talk about our role and how we approach things, and then how we sort of, how that plays out in the budget. And I'm sure that that will create some questions in addition to whatever questions you already had. So, and I'm going to do this in kind of a, I'll do it in my kind of a personal way, because I think the way we've changed law enforcement in Orono is kind of the same evolution that I've gone through since I started. Law enforcement when I started was here, and most places was enforce the law, enforce your way out of problems, respond to emergencies. You know, if somebody gets in a car accident, you go deal with the report. If somebody's having a problem with someone else, you go, you know, solve that problem by making them stop. And then enforcement of traffic laws and OUIs. And over time, that wasn't working. And Tom would remember the, you know, building an ordinance for noise problems, because we were dealing with such large parties and we didn't seem to be able to enforce our way out of that. So we kind of evolved, and the council evolved with the police department in what they wanted and how they wanted law enforcement to be done. And it turned out to be more of a cooperative way with the landlords and code enforcement and other departments within the community, that when we worked together and worked on a problem, it was much easier than just trying to enforce our way out of it. And I started to see the benefit of actually being involved in the community and attending events and putting on events and trying education. And my evolution kind of took place. I'm a convert. I get the concept of the more involved we are in the community and the more the community trusts us, the better we're able to serve. And I think just in the last 6 or 7 years, we've seen across the country how the narrative is really proving that as well when it comes to law enforcement. And the more we're able to build that trust in the community and make ourselves legitimate in what we do, we're more successful. So the budget that you see isn't just to enforce the law and respond to emergencies. It's more so about creating police officers that become invested in this community and understand how to deal with people in ways that build relationships. So when you see high numbers for a training line and a travel line associated with that, all of that revolves around building on what's taught at the academy. So the academy is going to teach us to be safe, going to help us understand how to follow the law, interpret the law, and enforce it. We then build upon that when we get officers here and try to instill in them the idea of involvement in this community and problem solving with other resources and learning how to talk to people you know, it's been said, it's hard to work in Orono as a police officer. And it's not that it's hard, it's just different. And if we dragged a police officer from most other parts of the state and dropped them into Orono and asked them to go police, they would not be successful until they learned how to treat people differently and to talk to them longer and to give people a little more time to understand what we're trying to get out of them. And so the arrest, if it's going to take place, the arrest is absolutely required by the time we make that arrest. If we can avoid the arrest and take a little more time with somebody to gain compliance, that's what we want. And those trainings are not cheap. And that evolution doesn't come cheap or easy. So we seek out those specialty trainings that are going to deal with crisis intervention or even crisis negotiation, that are going to deal with a professional, a leadership or a supervision type of training that teaches people your impact on other people and how to gain compliance without just, you know, using a heavy hand. So on paper, there's 15 of us, and there's 8 patrol officers that, you know, cover the lion's share of the work here in this community, with 3 sergeants that are doing this, you know, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And even that doesn't cover complete coverage. There are times where there's one officer in this town, you know, managing the complaints as they come in, and we try to schedule those times where there's one officer during the times that are very quiet. So the budget again reflects kind of both the training and also the hiring standards that we go by. So we know, and traditionally this department's going to lose 1 to 2 people a year. I've seen it for 20 years. And there are a variety of reasons. People get out of law enforcement, they move to other agencies. There are lures that are different than what Orono provides. And I also, like I said, Orono can be hard to work at if you don't have the right approach and you don't learn the right approach. So everything that you see for this budget kind of goes into how we build those officers and how I try to get them to evolve the way I did. It took me a while, so recognize it isn't overnight for some people. Some people we hire and they get it right from the beginning and they're easy to set out on their own. But other people we require a ton of training and a ton of professional development to gain the type of officer that you want in this community. I think that will cover what I wanted to say. I should talk for a moment, I guess, about the fact that we have a school resource officer that is shared with the school. So half his salary is shared, and he has taken that position to a level that, and I started with the first school resource officer when I started, and I've seen several school resource officers, and they all were fine. They all did a decent job. Officer Lesky has taken that to a level that I don't think we're going to be able to, I hope we'll be able to achieve when he goes someday. But he's invaluable to what he provides to our department. The work that he saves our officers from having to go up there and deal with issues that we never even hear about because he just managed it so smoothly at the school and through the school. We also, in addition to those officers and the sergeants, I have a detective that could probably be more than one person for the work that he has to do when it's busy, because most of his job is simply court work and maintaining the casework, dealing with the discovery issues, of which honestly body cameras and cruiser cameras cause a lot of behind the scenes work. So much of his work is the court and the DA's process, but he also has to investigate the more serious crimes and the more serious incidents that require a little more investigative work. And then the captain and I manage the day-to-day. The captain primarily manages the oversight from day-to-day on the operations, and then I hover around with the policy and budget and the accreditation issues, and and also, and additionally, the captain also manages internal affairs, scheduling, and making sure that we're all getting trained effectively. So I've blasted that out at you. I may have created more questions, but I'm happy to answer whatever questions you have. And if there's
Josh, so are the detective and the school resource officer considered patrol officers?
They are for the purposes of overtime shifts. And like now, our SRO is filling a patrol slot primarily with the school not in session.
But they're 2 of the 15 full-time positions.
Correct. Yeah, the 8 patrol officers that is their job, is patrol. both the SRO and the detective are additional positions that have specific tasks that they're assigned to.
Okay. What would it look like if we tried to drop one patrol officer?
We are perennially down one patrol officer, and I think it was just 2 or 3 years ago that we added a patrol officer based on the workload that we had. So what it would look like, how it would feel in the community is, and it's more about how hard we're going to work our officers or what level of safety we're willing to risk. Well, as I said, there are times now in our schedule that an officer works alone, mostly from 3 to 7 in the morning, certain nights of the week, and then occasionally on a weekend if we're down somebody or someone's at training and we don't have the personnel to fill it. They might be alone in the morning on a day shift, which does come with it some inherent risk. When we drop an officer off of the schedule, we're either filling that overtime in order to maintain a proper amount of officers working per shift, or we're rolling the dice and hoping that they're not going to have that critical call, or that there's going to be area agencies that can respond to back someone up on a more critical call. And the example I'll give you is just a couple weeks ago, there was a shooting in Bucksport over relationship type Facebook foolishness. That suspect, the alleged suspect, is a resident of Orono that we have dealt with many times and has been very volatile every time we've had to deal with him. It just happened to be that he was in Bucksport when this actual confrontation took place. And and it took place on a weekend. And had that taken place at 10 o'clock in the morning with one officer, I'm not thrilled that type of incident would have had to been handled by a single officer. So we accept that risk at times. We get it at 3 to 7 in the morning, pretty quiet. And we get it that Saturday and Sunday mornings can be fairly slow. And one officer we can scrape by and hope that, by noontime when the second officer comes in, we're in a better place. But I don't feel great about that just because of the safety issue, or continuing to work the officers more and more overtime in order to fill that shift. That was a long-winded way of answering your question.
I appreciate it. Thank you. Does anybody else have any other questions?
Yeah, I have a question too. And this is also areas of discussion in the narrative, Josh, and it was about the wellness program, the pilot program. And because the pilot program is costing $7,500, my question was, is this the time? Is this the year? And I know I totally get what you guys do, and it's wonderful, and we do have a great police department, and I mean I understand that, but I'm just wondering if this is the right time where we're in a budget, kind of crunch to be implementing, or I mean, it says pilot only, but it's a $7,500
So
pilot
Cheryl,
program. Yeah.
the issue with that is, number one, I think the answer that Josh will give is probably yes, and I think he should speak to that. But contractually, based on our conversations with council a while ago, we entered into negotiations with the labor union and have a tentative agreement on a sidebar on a contract. So it's going to be really hard to walk back at this point.
Okay. That was my question.
But
So
I think Josh can speak to why he thinks it's important.
I think it's important too. I was just wondering if this was the right time to be doing that, but I do understand that was negotiated before this COVID thing happened. So thank you. You don't have to talk about it.
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering, Josh, if just for the benefit of folks who might be following along with this discussion, but have not necessarily been up to date on some of our previous discussions, if you could talk a little bit about some of the larger cuts that you have made to this budget concerning vehicles and intern wages and that sort of thing.
Sure. The intern, and that is one of those intangible things, and I'll explain that 4 years ago, we received the approval to have an intern, and we interviewed, and we hit the jackpot with the person that we got. It was a freshman business major. And despite never actually spending all of the money any year that we had to set aside because of her busy schedule, the benefit we got from her related to accreditation and her assistance to Jess and just her overall impact on our department was, you can't put a price on that. And the intangible part about all this is we accept when you bring an intern in that they're going to gain, maybe more than you gain at times, because they're learning so much about the real world and whatever it is that they are being exposed to. For us, it was law enforcement. And you hope to get some service back from them. And we certainly did with Gabby. This is someone who, in her 4 years, because she was exposed to us, is now going to be, she's getting into law enforcement. She's in a background right now to be hired by the state police. So this is a girl who came in thinking that she wanted to be a business major and wanted to help us on the back end of what we do and not really get involved with the law enforcement side of things, and then got exposed to enough of the reports and the talk and the people and went on some ride-alongs that she's now made a complete career change so that we can take a little bit of credit for because of her experience with us, besides what we got from her with her work that she did for us. So it's going to hurt to lose her, period. We're sad that she's going. But my hope would have been to pick up another person just like that and spend 4 years shaping them and then letting them help us and help Jess in particular. I think that the help that she was able to give Jess was critical, and certainly when it comes to accreditation. So I get the times that we're in and that our current intern is moving on anyway. So I can see the rationale for cutting it right now and saving a little bit of money. The cruiser. We were here a year ago and we decided to roll the dice and say, let's do the right thing for the town fiscally and give up that car in hopes that we could limp through a year. Now my hope is we're not going to get struck by lightning twice and have another serious issue with a cruiser that we're pushing past its normal life with us. But again, I can see your position and I can see the fiscal responsibility of rolling the dice one more time and saving the money that is associated with that car, and we'll hope for the best.
My only follow-up question to that is the $5,000 that's budgeted for maintenance and repairs, is that wishful thinking, or do you think it hopefully without getting struck by lightning, that might be in the ballpark? Or
Right. I think that should cover, some fairly serious things breaking on the car, but not a motor. So we'll hope for we'll hope that it'll only go up within the 5,000 for repair.
Next item line on that is the gasoline. I know we just got a hell of a deal on a huge bulk purchase. Is that going to affect our number on that? We have the same 26,000 from FY20.
That's a great question. I'm going to hand that off to Sophie. She taught me a couple of years ago to not underestimate how much money I'm going to spend on fuel. So I like to be where I can manage.
But it's 75 cents a gallon. That's a heck of a purchase.
So I think, Sam, that the concern we have is that if this stabilizes back to anywhere near where we were before, and I have to tell you that don't compare 75 cents a gallon to the 2-something or that we were paying at the pump, because we weren't paying that at the pump, for the bulk gas. My sense is that we're in weird times, and if we cut here, I'm afraid that we're going to end up over expending, because we're also at a time when we're not running quite as many miles. We've had people at the academy and we've had vacancies this year. So I would say more than usual. So I would much prefer to leave this where it is. And if we trend for a period of time, then definitely look at cutting back. But this is one of those places, it's kind of like salt for the road. You can cut back, but when the ice storms come, you still have to buy the salt, and then you don't have money.
Thank you. That makes perfect sense.
The other thing I was thinking is the professional accreditation. So by dropping Kalia, we saved what, about $20,000?
No.
No, I thought it was 24 or 25.
No, per year we were spending roughly $5,000 per year.
So we saved 1,700. Okay.
Right. So in that line is our records management system, which houses all of our policies and all of our training, and it cues people to get on board and do their trainings. And so that is actually the bulk now of that line. That's roughly $2,200 a year for that Power DMS subscription. And because we've dropped down to, I think, $850 a year for the MLEAP, the main law enforcement accreditation, that'll be our annual subscription, as opposed to the $3,000 a year that or $32,000 that we spent for CLIA.
Anyone else have any other questions on the police department?
I just had one more, and I think I've said this is my third budget. I'm so excited. I actually know what's going on this time. The crossing guard, do we really need a crossing guard at the street light? I think I say this like every year. Like, and I know the answer, but is it really, like, because I've walked kids over and back and across Main Street for years, and we just go with the light. So I'm just curious again.
I'm used to, it's been a while, but I'm used to being on a stand in court.
Yeah. Okay.
What is your actual question to me?
My actual question is, do we need a crossing guard who just looks at the lights and walks out when the lights turn red, which people are supposed to stop anyway, and crosses kids and then goes back when the light turns green? Like, there's a light there at that Main Street crossing.
It's hard to tell people how to feel, but I will tell you that people feel as if he is needed. The light does control the intersection. So in my opinion, we shouldn't need a crossing guard there because the light controls it. And if kids are, properly educated, they should be able to safely cross. The feeling in the community by parents that let their kids cross there can be one of, he is desperately needed. Therefore, it becomes a you question. We could save roughly $10,000 a year for that one crossing guard.
So it's not quite half for that crossing guard.
Right, we pay more for the crossing guard up at Westwood because he's more highly trained and does more work with traffic control.
So if it's $10,000 in expenses, Josh, it would only be $5,000 net because the school RSU 26 reimburses for 50% of the costs of the crossing guards.
Yeah, so you could have
staff actually recommended last year or the year before that we go to just the one crossing guard, and the feedback we got from the ACE committee, the community, and the RSU was that they felt it was very important to maintain that. And at the time, you agreed with them, but that would be a net savings of about $5,000.
I personally don't think the aggravation we will take by eliminating that crossing guard is worth doing it. I just know what the reaction would be, and it will be a very emotional reaction that we aren't concerned about the safety of our young people, and I don't personally want to go through that.
I agree with Tom.
Right, but the crossing guard wasn't always there. The crossing guard was originally in the up a little bit further where the bus stop was. The crossing guard wasn't always at the light.
I understand that, yeah. and I understand what Josh said, that with proper training, kids should be able to cross at that intersection with the light, just as you do. But I just know the amount of grief we will take by eliminating that, and I don't think it's worth it.
I think it's more than just an amount of grief. I mean, I agree with that assessment, but I think it may save $5,000, but it will send a perceived message that we
Correct.
don't want to send because it's not accurate. And also the assumption that every kid is going to be trained appropriately absolutely have the potential. But I mean, the fact that that is necessarily the case, even if it's just one kid that needs that help to know when to cross and have that guard there, I think it's worth it. Even though
Okay, I'm going to say one more thing, one more time, that walking those kids across that parking lot coming out of whatever that is, the store there, right on the corner. Coming out of there, people aren't looking for kids when they get their gas and they get their groceries and they walk and their subway and they try to pull out into traffic in anticipation of that light crossing. I have walked kids across there. That for me is a dangerous situation right there, because you can't get across that parking lot to the crossing guard if people in cars aren't looking to see that kids are on their way to that crosswalk. So that for me, as a parent and as a guard, as a child care provider, is always touchy. I'm always going, please don't run across that parking lot. Cars aren't looking for you. They can't see you. And so that to me is the danger right there, is getting to the crossing guard to begin with. So that is my 2 cents worth on the crossing guard situation.
Reasonable.
And I've experienced it. This is lived experience. So I have experienced cars not looking for kids, just wanting to get out of that parking lot because everybody's stopped and they want to go. And they're not always looking to see the elementary school kids walking across there to the crossing guard. Thank you.
Yeah.
So I understand the comment, Cheryl, and I think it is absolutely a legitimate one. The question I have is there direction I should be taking from that comment?
I am hearing from other counselors that they don't want to move it forward. So,
Right.
right. So we will look at it at a different time, I guess.
It's okay. I just wanted to give you my 2 cents worth about that crossing guard.
Any other questions on the police before we move to animal control? Getting the head nods no. So Josh, do you want to address anything in animal control?
It's that it is required that we do this. Both have an animal control officer, which we're fortunate to be able to contract through Penobscot County, and also have a place to take animals, which we do through the animal orphanage up in Old Town. So those are kind of fixed costs that we are and we're stuck with, but we're also in a good place for what we're charged. I think we're charged very fairly for both.
Is the animal orphanage just cat?
No, they'll take cats and dogs.
Okay.
And our can still strive to manage whatever calls they can before we even call out an animal control officer. So if it's just cats, we're a little more like cats roam around, so we don't like to take them to the animal orphanage. But dogs, if we can't find an owner here and bring them back to the station and post it on social media, we'll take those dogs up to the animal orphanage ourselves if we can, to save the call out of the ACO.
And we don't call out the ACO because we're charged on the volume of calls per year?
Right. If it's something that we can manage and we have the time, it's simpler for us to do it and cheaper for us to do it. Rather have her called out for issues that we can't manage.
I just want to say, it's also, I hate to say this, but it's great PR. I've never seen so many excited people, they see a dog posted that was found on the PD page, and all of a sudden people are like, oh my God. And so I think there's a certain element of great publicity with it too. For free.
Any other comments on animal control? Then we need it. All right. Thank you, Josh. Anybody have any last questions for Josh? No? Sophie, you have anything?
So I just want to kind of clarify where we are. Is there anything Josh and I need to work on and bring back, or are we good at this point?
I think good.
And I think you said it correctly, good at this point.
I guess we're moving on to fire then. Is Chief Lowe there? There he is.
I'm here.
Okay. First, I want to thank Josh, and the first item is emergency medical services.
So I'm gonna take the hit for that. The way we set it up, it's actually fire first, and then emergency medical.
Sorry about that. Okay.
So I thought, kind of building off what Josh did, it would be a good idea just to give you some background, especially for those that may not understand fully what it is that the fire department does or how we operate. So when you call the fire department or you think of the fire department, very often you think of people that will come out in fire trucks and spray water, and sometimes we're able to get the fire out and sometimes we aren't. And that's really not entirely what the fire department does. We're more of it's what's known as an all hazards agency. Basically, if you don't know who to call when you have a problem, it usually will default to us, whether it's ducts in a storm drain, basement flooding, power line down on the road, whatever the case may be. It's usually the fire department that gets deployed for something along those lines. So we really do have an all hazards approach to everything that we do. Out of the Orono Fire Department, we certainly run fire response. Now that fire response means building fires, it means vehicle fires, it means fires involving chemicals and fuels, it means electrical fires. I think I said vehicle fires already. We've been known to respond to a boat fire occasionally. So wildland fires or others, there's all types of fires that we respond to. Additionally, out of the Orono Fire Department, we also respond to emergency medical calls. So you call 911 for an ambulance. It's an ambulance that responds to you from the fire department. We run emergency management out of the fire department now. And emergency management, when we have a major windstorm and there are a lot of trees that have fallen down and a lot of power lines down and people have needs in the community, the coordination is typically done through the fire department, through our emergency operations center there with fire staff and other town officials managing and coordinating and directing people where to go. We run code enforcement out of the fire department, not code enforcement, but life safety code enforcement is what I should say, which is different than the code enforcement division that we have in the town. When we look at life safety, we're looking at things that make the people inside the building safe and things that will reduce damage to the property. So we look at things like exiting from the building, we look at sprinkler systems, we look at the ability to access the building from the outside. We look at smoke detectors and smoke alarms rather, and flame detectors, and a lot of other components that are involved. When you switch from one type of occupancy, say a restaurant, to a filling station, if you will, there are all kinds of safety things that get triggered that brings us in and we have to look at. Our fire inspector, Rob St. Louis, who also serves as the deputy chief, spends a lot of time reviewing codes, making sure that what we tell people is appropriate. We're giving them good direction so that they aren't caught off guard or have to go back and do things. We also spend a lot of time talking with the fire marshal's office about the things that we have to do or the things that we're looking at rather before we tell people what they have to do. So there's a lot of interagency cooperation, much like in law enforcement, that happens out of the fire department. We do a fair amount of public education. And as you know, as we've talked about many times before, we run the hazardous materials team that not only works for town of Orono and the University of Maine, but we're responsible to the entirety of Penobscot County and a good swath of the state of Maine as a state asset. So if we're activated by Maine Emergency Management Agency, we could find ourselves anywhere in the state and potentially anywhere in New England should the event be large enough. So a lot of things happening here, even though it's a small town with a small fire department. There's a lot of stuff going on all the time. I already spoke briefly about Arlene. I thought it was kind of important to bring that forward, just so you know that that's not a position that's just stagnant. Not only is she very busy, it's an evolving position. And the more things that we can find that match with her skill set and her abilities, the more we bring her in. And she's very engaged. She's very anxious to learn more about the fire department and do more things with us. So it's really been a good fit for us over here. And she's really she's anxious to come to work every day, I guess is what I would say. And that's not just me speaking. Those are the words from her mouth. I did want to touch on one thing that Josh talked about in regards to training. And when he talks about coming out of the academy and building off what the law enforcement officers have when they come from the academy, we don't have that ability here in the town of Orono. Now, for firefighting, we have an ability. But for all the extra stuff that we do, we're required to provide all that training in-house. So when I talk about things like special operations, which is not hazardous materials, but is focused on rope rescue and confined space rescue, which is going into tunnels and pipes and boilers and those things. When I talk about water rescue, which is going into the river to take somebody out, or making a rescue out on Pushaw Lake, or assisting our partner agencies with doing that, those are all things that are not taught in our fire academy. State of Maine, the fire academy is only 2 weeks long, and that's the hands-on piece. A lot of it is done online or through distance learning. Most of it is a 2-week program that's done hands-on that gives you the very basics that you need to be able to fight a fire. Anything else has to be delivered in-house, or it has to be delivered at a school in a remote location. And most of those schools are held out of state. In Orono, we're lucky with the budget that we have not only been able to bring in-house instructors, outside instructors into us at a relatively cheap rate, but we also have been able to build our in-house instruction cadre so that we can provide all those programs to the national standard and meet the requirements that we need to be able to deliver that service to the town at a very minimal cost. For us to do just confined space rescue would be in the thousands of dollars to bring an outside instructor in, because we would have to get all 15, 16 people trained to that level. And more than likely that would have to be broken up over different shifts. So really it's money well invested when we talk about professional development and associations and stuff like that to benefit the town and benefit the community in general. If we didn't provide those services, we would either, well, it's not either. We would have to contract with another agency to provide those services for us. And the agency that we would probably have to work with would be Bangor Fire. And I can't even wager a guess as to what that amount of money would be to provide that for us. But I'm going to say that it would more than likely be more than what we are spending right now to deliver that training internally. The last thing I'll throw out to you is that you'll notice in our budget this year, we have broken out separate items. So vehicle maintenance or fleet repair has been broken out into a couple different categories. EMS has been broken out into several different categories. Training has been broken out into a few different categories. Since I got here a couple of years ago, I've struggled with how the money flows and how to accurately assign allotments of the resources you give us to individual areas. So hopefully by breaking this out, we're better able to track where it's going. We have more transparency on where the money's going. And finally, we're better able to decide how to allocate those funds more appropriately, if you will. So I guess with that, those are the high points that I wanted to hit before we started this. I'll certainly take questions, or if you want to know whatever, I'll willing to listen.
Could you or Sophie quickly explain why we got these new documents today?
Sure. Well, for a couple of reasons. Number one, the fire payroll is one that we are expending significant overtime right now because we have someone who is out. So I wanted you to see, because every week that the budget goes down significantly, and I know you guys are very astute And if it looks like there's money left in a budget, you really don't want to give me more next year. You're pretty good at holding my feet to the fire. So I wanted you to see that. And I also wanted you to have just the most recent budget breakdown. I had hoped that we would have an alteration in here that didn't come through yet. But in your original budget and on this sheet, it shows a request for $13,000 of legal services, where we have finalized the labor contract, and based on the current union management relationship, Jeff and I are comfortable rolling that back a little bit. And so you'll notice in your budget that you originally got, there's emergency management with no funds in the budget. It just has a bunch of numbers, like account numbers there. Our plan is to roll the $4,000 that we will save in legal fees into about $3,700 worth of emergency management budget. So that's our public health response, our emergency management issues. So I worked really hard to get you this report printed, thinking that finance had made that change, and it wasn't made. So you just have up-to-date budget numbers now.
Okay. Anyone have any questions on the fire budget? No?
Yes, I have a couple of questions. Jeff, could you talk a little bit about the increase in vacation coverage? We have the same number of people, and I'm wondering why vacation coverage is up 37%.
Sophie, does that relate to the recent contract?
It relates somewhat to the recent contract, but we have some longer tenured individuals. So when we looked at their cap out, we knew that we would have more vacation days taken. And we have somebody that is anticipated to be on long-term medical leave. So all vacation would be overtime.
I didn't follow that. I'm sorry. Well, all vacation would be overtime.
Yeah. So, Tom, in the fire department, unlike the police department, when somebody who is on shift takes vacation, we either have a floater that can fill that shift,
yep,
or we have to bring in somebody with overtime. When we have somebody that is on long-term medical leave, means we can't fill the position unless we come back to you and ask for per diem. And that means that the floater automatically goes in to fill that individual's shift slot. And so anytime anybody else takes time, we backfill to get to the 5 at the staffing level which is the staffing level that at this point council has agreed to. We have a minimum contractual staffing level of 4. Remember, we came back and talked to you about that it really wasn't safe to run 2 ambulances with a staffing level of 4. And so we were filling to 5.
Mm-hmm. Okay. And unscheduled overtime, is that a similar explanation? Again, a 30% increase.
I think it's a similar situation where we have that long-term employee out. That is also, no, I think it's around the long-term employee that's out is where most of that increase is focused.
So that one right now, we have overexpended that budget line. It was 10,000. we've expended $42,000 year to date. So yeah, we talked to you several months ago about the fact that we thought we were going to be over in some of those lines, but under overall in the budget.
I had one general overall question, and it was about, and Jeff, you can speak to this, and I don't know what's going on, but one of my questions, and I just wrote it in here, was, will testing for new hires include COVID-19 testing? Are we getting any kind of funding for, like, if this grows to a point where municipalities have to start testing who we send out and who comes to work and things like that? Are we going to be funded for that, or is that going to be a municipal expense?
So we're collecting all that data. Anytime we send somebody out, any purchases we make or anything that's related to COVID, with the expectation that at least some of it will be returned back to us where it's been declared a federal emergency. How much of that, I don't have any idea. But the thought is, and the direction from the state and from our county emergency management was to start recording all that stuff. So the short answer is yes, we think some, but we don't know how much.
And go ahead, Sophie.
So what we're learning, Cheryl, is that if it is a direct expense, so for example, if we could document that we think we had an exposure and we needed to test, then that would be covered, I think, by the FEMA reimbursement. However, what we keep hearing for them is if it's proactive, if it's not required stemming directly to a response, that they are not reimbursing us those things. So because of state law around workers' compensation, COVID-19 is considered a communicable disease, which means there is a presumption that it's a work-related injury, which means every time we think we have any kind of exposure, we're filing FYI claims with our insurance company. So we're hoping some of that will come in. I don't know that we would proactively test someone for COVID-19 prior to hire. I don't know that we would do that.
And that was a question. And what about PPE stuff as well? Should we be looking at budgeting for this kind of coverage, for the coronavirus? Is this something that we need to put into a municipal expense at this point?
Yeah, Jeff, would you say that our PPE for response in general is already split between the fire department budget and the hazmat budget? Between the two, it would be part of our normal expense?
I would say that it's more fire budget than hazmat, but I would think that some of the funds allocated for emergency management or public health would be earmarked for a catch for all town employees, not just public safety.
I think we've tried in this budget, Cheryl, to be open-minded and thinking proactively, but on the other hand, I think it is a fine line in terms of not wanting to really be looking at the worst possible case scenario, because if we were in the situation where our current funds or our requested funds weren't covering our needs, I'm going to guess we would have to be talking about reallocating other pieces of the budget. So I think neither Jeff or I wanted to go down the worst case scenario path, because it would really inflate this budget considerably.
So we had a question. So in next year's budget, we are phasing in a third, correct?
Third what? I'm sorry, I didn't hear what
A
that.
third shift of, so that we're, so fourth shift. So would hiring a person or two now decrease the vacation and overtime budgets and help with the cost from the fourth one?
So Jeff and I right now are running numbers because our thought would be, number one, we're trying to get information back from the employee who is out. What we've been told at this point is that it's 9 months to a year longer that this employee will be out, but there were certain tests that were supposed to happen. And I really don't want to make hiring decisions based on what might happen as opposed to some actual medical guidance. So if this employee is truly going to be out this long, Jeff and I have already started running the numbers about a per diem or hiring early if we can save money, which we did before. We knew we were going to have a vacancy and we hired somebody in May for a July 1 start. We're kind of in that same place. We think that if we were to hire sooner, we might be able to save a lot of that overtime. But for the purpose of the budget, our thought was to present it this way because we know we wouldn't make any changes that would be any higher than that. And we're kind of hoping that we'd be able to get some medical information back, but with the public health emergency, everything is kind of stopped. So yes, you're in the right, great idea. We're on it.
Okay, great. Anyone else have any questions or comments about the fire department budget? Hearing none, I will move on to emergency medical services.
So emergency medical services was just a breakout from the fire department budget before. And what we look to do is capture, or to start capturing rather, more transparently what it was we were spending to deliver EMS. And it's a new section, and I really don't have a lot to say about it right now. Everything that you see there in last year's, was encompassed in last year's budget. There's no request for additional funds on the operations side of the budget, except for the medical director going up $200 to meet a contractual requirement. Other than that, the funds requested, again, were the same as last year, and it's just broken out so that you can see where the money's going and what we're assigning to each line.
And this is based on still running 2 ambulances?
Yes.
So, and the data for this came from what you've already expended. Is there a way that we could see that? Because in all the other budget lines, we get to see what was budgeted and actual for 2019 and what was budgeted and what's the year to date for 2020 and the balance. And because you've pulled this from somewhere else, probably using the data that you had, I'm wondering if there's a way we can see that data.
So Lori, in your custom budget report, you see medical supplies at $40,000. We've expended $33,805.55 thus far this year. You can see under professional services that we have a medical director. Where is he? Where did he go?
I see under professional services, there's a 690-611 medical testing.
No, that's not the right one. We can get you a breakout.
Okay, great, thank you.
On page 74, Sophie is a medical director. 690626, if that's what you're looking for.
Yes, that is exactly what I'm looking for. So he is there. Billing is the parking ticket commission. That's really commissions for collections, which we're changing that name, which was $25,000 budget. We've expended $15,700 this year. So there's another 25,000. So, I mean, it's all there. It's a matter of pulling it out, and we're happy to do that. I'm sure Jeff will flag that for us.
Is this an area we're concerned about costs? Is that why we're breaking it out?
My perspective. Oh, go ahead, Jeff.
I have a concern for cost. We have tracked previously. It's hard for me to get my arms around exactly where the not where the money's going, but it's hard for me to track what each individual piece is costing us to run the department. I can set up a couple different spreadsheets, but those are really only good for me, and they don't communicate out what the actual expenses are, so that everybody is able to see just how much we're spending. Take, for instance, medications. That's a considerable line at the end of the year where we're spending, all of $2,000 to buy this stuff. And it would be helpful to know what the trends are and those types of things, instead of just doing a batch medical supply line. And again, for me, it helps me, in my mind anyway, be more transparent for what we're spending money on. Sophie, I know you've got a depth perspective on that. I'll let you.
I know that ever since I've been here for 9 years, I've been trying to get the fire department to break out its budget a little bit more. And Jeff was the first chief that would actually bite on that for me. But your budget is supposed to be a management tool. And when you see something like $25,000 for, EMS medical supplies, and you have no idea what's really driving that, it makes it really hard to manage it. And so we wanted to break it up into smaller pieces, that this is his best thinking based on our expenses in his tenure. But the idea being, we'll actually be able to see how much it costs to maintain an ambulance. And you've been with Rob Yerxa in front of you before, when he can show you the trends on a truck to tell you that it's really time to change it. And when that's getting wrapped in with ladder truck repairs that cost us $14,000 to $20,000 every time we have to send it away, you can lose that. So the idea here was really about transparency and allowing the chief to be able to trend it, and to be able to. Jeff has been doing an incredible job building capacity within the captains and lieutenants. And if you're going to give them some responsibility around building projects, you've got to give them a budget that they can understand. And when you're lumping things in bigger pockets, it makes it more difficult to do that, I think. Have I summed it up appropriately, Chief?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And do the revenues look about the same as far as the 76,000?
So that is one of those crystal ball questions. So we have the about 32,000 that we're expecting from VZ for EMS services. And on the revenue side, we've maintained $394,000 projected revenue for EMS services billables. What concerns me a little bit is with the public health emergency, we have seen our calls drop. Jeff, last number was about 140 behind, calls for service behind where we were
That's
this time last year. Was that right?
Yep.
And what concerns me is right before the public health emergency really started in earnest, we were on track to come in where we have been on that trend. So if we continue this year with EMS in this public health emergency, unless we have a lot of people that need to be transported, it feels like people are not as likely to call and want to go to the hospital right now.
I have to say, I'm really not sad that it's dropped. Even though the revenue is off, but wear and tear on the ambulances and the staff.
Well, and I will tell you that even though, when you say it's dropped, we were at one point this year, we were running five calls a day. We're still getting those peaks. It's just slowed, and I don't have anything to knock on right now, so.
Anyone else have any questions on emergency medical services?
Could I go back to fire for a question if we could go backwards just for a second? Sophie, could you comment on the increase in health insurance, which is up 6%?
Sure. So the health insurance increase is based on two things. Three things. The first is a projected 9% increase for starting in January, for January's billing. The second is we've hired a couple of people, or we've had a couple of plan changes in the year. So from single to family or single to parent and child, which will increase. And the last one is for the month of May and June in next year's budget, we're planning to bring our shift personnel on. So that will be 2 months for 4 people, 4 additional people.
Okay. What happens to the floater position?
That got absorbed, Tom, into the fifth person on the shift. So we were going to hire 4 and move the floater. Yep. And then my thought is we would deal with it the way we dealt before, which is if we could demonstrate that we can save money by hiring another floater as opposed to paying overtime, then we would deal with it at that point.
Mm-hmm. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Want to move on to emergency management?
So this is one that you won't see a change in no increase in the budget, but we're going to reallocate some of those legal funds that we can do now that the contract has been approved into emergency management. And if you've got just a minute, let me just quickly walk through that with you. In emergency management, we are looking at $750 for equipment. These are video displays, communication equipment, easels, charts, and other items that are required for the Emergency Operations Center. And so this is about trying to help outfit that a bit and to be able to manage. We've been using the EOC more with a lot of it has been around weather, but the major storm and wind events. The supplies would be just kind of what you would figure. It's the copious packets that have to be, that are used and then have to be replenished. Essentially, you're stocking office type supplies in tubs because you've got to be able to move them. Emergency management training, we had $1,200 proposed for that. And that is for the trainings that's not covered by the federal government. And it's not just for public safety people, because there's training that we actually have to give for other incident level folks and new employees. And then the public health response for about $1,500. That brings the total budget for emergency management to $3,950. So it's $50 less than what we pulled out of legal services.
Sophie, what was the supplies figure?
500.
500.
And I will tell you, Tom, that part of my thought in building this budget is that if we end up with a public health response, it's going to mean that we have to reallocate the budget of any kind of significant size. So I wanted to try to keep enough in there that we could reallocate to about that almost $4,000 level.
Is there any federal funding for this type of service?
Yeah. So, some of the training we can go to for free. There really aren't like grants, Cindy, that we could apply to kit out our EOC that I'm aware of. Every once in a while, if we get FEMA reimbursement, we could try to put some money in for EOC. We did that this time. We were initially told that we could use some of that money from the windstorm to build out the EOC and make some changes that are really need to be made. And then when we had to do the final paperwork, we learned that no, that really wasn't what we could use it for. And instead we're using it for a survey of our town trees to see which ones have to come down because of risk around trees, around falling in another windstorm.
So it isn't something that's an automatic refund if there's a state of emergency or anything?
No, what we get refunded for, and I go back to like, I think we've had a storm, winter event, and we've had a wind event since I've been here. They'll reimburse us for wages and overtime wages and use of equipment and expenses related to money that we actually paid out for response. But hey, I'm still trying to get a nice jacket from the chief that meets the standard, so when I'm out there, I don't have to wear Rob St. Louis's, which doesn't quite fit me right.
Anyone else have any questions or comments on the emergency management? All right, moving on to public health.
I think we've done that one. I think, Jeff, do you think
Yeah.
we've done that one?
I think so.
Okay, everybody's okay with that? Hazmat?
Oh, yes. So can I'm looking at the budget, and because hazmat's on a separate fund, it got set aside. So can we do hazmat the day that we come back to do capital when Jeff is with us? Is that all
Works
right
for
with
me.
folks? All right. The one that we've missed in here is the fire protection fee, and I just want to make sure that folks are aware, this is the $239,660. We pay all but about $1,000 of that to the Orono VZ Water District. Just about 1,000 goes to the Old Town Water District. And that's because the Public Utilities Commission requires that municipalities pay a fee related to the upsizing of the system for fire protection. So what they say is that a water system that is just about potable water for the community would be built much smaller and cost less to maintain. So because it needs to be big enough to be able to support fire flows, we end up paying a percentage of the district's user fees. So I've talked to Boyd. He has indicated that the district is considering a rate increase. He is not sure when that rate increase is going to be instituted or how much it will be. I've asked him to see if we could try to dial that in for this budget. So like if they were going to wait a year, then that would be great. We could do it July 1 of next year. I've asked if that's possible, but like us, Boyd has to get enough rates in to pay for his operations as well. So he was going to be looking at that. That is a place that assessment is not something that we can negotiate. It is part of the rate structure that ultimately has to get approved by the Public Utilities Commission. I will continue to work with Boyd to try to dial in when that might happen, when the rate increase might go into effect and kind of the general idea of the scope scale of it. So that is, right now it's budgeted the same. That's likely to go up.
Does anybody have any questions that weren't answered, or if there's anything that they want Sophie and Jeff to look at and get back to us on?
Meg just messaged me that her internet went out. She's trying to get it rebooted back up.
Well, so I just had one overall question / statement. There's a comment made about concern of lack of visuals for people that are watching this. And can we just go do a quick recap of what this process is like? This is a workshop as we're going over a budget, but then there will be a budget presentation down the road at any particular point that's convenient, but just before we finish today, because I think there is, based on some of the comments I've seen floating out there, there is some confusion about why we're not doing more of a presentation where this is actually a working sort of discussion about the whole thing. So if we could just provide that overview. Welcome.
Sure. So the other thing, Sam, is as the comment popped up, it caused me to go back and wonder if the budget has actually been posted online in a place that people can easily find it. So I'm going to go back and double check that. I'll work with Belle just to make sure. But like every year, we start out with a high-level overview that we talk with council and sometimes have some pretty pictures, sometimes not. The draft budget turns into the council's proposed budget through this series of workshops that we've always done in a very informal way. And then when we get to June 15th, there will be a public hearing, which has high-level by department overview of both the numbers and the major changes. We go through that whole piece. Citizens then can ask questions, and it's usually that goes up on the website for a bit. We take a 2-week break unless there are comments that cause the council to feel like they really need to rework the budget, which one year there was and other years there have not been. But during that 2 weeks. It gives citizens the opportunity to talk to council about concerns that they might have. And then we come back that last Monday of June and adopt a budget. That helpful, Sam?
Oh, very much so. Yeah, no, I understood. I just want to make sure we had an overview out there because I think some people had questions of why this isn't more of an official presentation. That's coming.
Yeah, you guys are working from a 182-page draft budget.
Oh, yes, we are. Yes, we are. It's a doorstopper.
Sorry, everyone, my internet cut out for a few minutes. I got kicked out, but I'm glad, Sam, that you brought that up because I think sometimes maybe it can get a little bit confusing for folks to see the process start, but not fully understand like how the process works. So just for everybody out there, I want to emphasize the word workshop. I mean, like we hash out all of the nitty gritty and it's not, you know, it's very informal. It's not really designed to be super, I mean, user friendly, like to the public because we kind of talk about it and hash it out and it's not really final. When the council gets to a place where it feels fairly comfortable with the budget, and then Sophie does her fantastic presentation that's very user friendly for the residents to see how the budget all fits together. And then we wait for feedback on it and make changes if necessary. So I appreciate that people are logging in to watch these budget meetings every day. The more input and the more involvement, the better from the public. But also know that this is how the sausage is made, and then the fancy presentation comes later on.
Speaking of that, Sophie, before you get into your brief town manager update, could you update us on where the revenues are for this year? And have you seen any changes?
Well, when we last spoke, I told you I thought our forecasting was showing between $550,000 and $700,000 decrease or under collection. Nothing has changed to make me think it's more optimistic. I am waiting. This week is the week that we will get our April or our May revenue sharing. It's for April, but we get it May 20th. And that is going to tell me about how far I think we'll be under, allow me to better forecast the revenue sharing, which right now stands at $340,000 left to collect. So far for the month of May, we have paid over almost $400,000 of expenses, and I've got the school check that goes out this week for another $570,000. And we've brought in $50,000. So that's what happens when people aren't paying their excise tax. So I am nervous about our revenue collections. I think my staff is working, the department heads are working so hard to try to limit expenditures, but still maintain the core of their mission. I mean, that's the reason that we're here. And it looks right now that we probably will be about $700,000 under collected and hopefully about $700,000 under expended if we can manage it. But it is very tight. The good news that we have is, well, the governor came out last week and said, if your community will accept excise tax, then you must now register your car within 30 days of the order, which was last week. She then turned around and sent a message out through Maine Municipal Association saying, concern has been raised by the Secretary of State's office about this, and so that portion is on hold. So I am hoping that we will begin to be able to collect excise at a more, I mean, we were supposed to be collecting in the registering about 400 cars a month for May and June. And we have barely scratched that. We're down to about 40% of what we had been collecting. So my concern is that when we get to the end of the year, we will be significantly under collected. The good news, talking with the town auditor, they have gotten clarification from their regulatory bodies that say that we can, if we track the revenue that we have received on for excise tax on the registrations that would have expired in March, April, or May, if we can track the money that we receive from those that come in after the beginning of the year through the end of August, they will allow us to pull those back into this fiscal year. So we're working with staff right now to try to set up our software to be able to track that appropriately. But yeah, we are, based on some questions I'm getting from counselors and the community, I think there might be this thought that because there isn't as much activity, that our expenses are way down and we have all this money. And the fact is, we are intentionally pushing our expenses down because we know we're not going to have the revenue to offset it. And when that happens, you end up, when you have a deficit in your current operating year, the money has to come from somewhere, and it comes from fund balance. So, you know, I think we need to be just really careful.
Which at some point we will discuss the effects of this current year's budget on next year's budget.
Sure, we absolutely will. So I have been working, because this is a unique year, you know, I've been working through the budget. We had a wonderful budget document, like 90% complete, and then COVID-19 hit, and it became apparent that it was going to impact what we were going to do for the FY21 budget. And my staff kind of turned on a dime, and we quickly tried to get you out a revised budget that wasn't, I mean, we've cut about $400,000 from this budget to get you the document that you see today. So I've spent the last week trying to, because I wanted to get you out the document so that we could do the budget workshops. So I spent the last week trying to get an overview document that will tell a story for you that might help kind of put all the pieces together. And part of that, you've got revenues, you've got expenses, you've got the things that have already been cut to make the budget that you see today. You've got suggestions of what we might think about cutting if you're trying to get us lower. And you've got how this impacts our assets moving forward. You know, we had $10 million of fund balance, and that sounds like a lot, but we had already budgeted to use about $1 million of assigned fund balance. So that's already dropping. And I need you guys to see that and understand that hitting the savings account, you know, I keep putting in here, we have optimistic revenue projections because I'm waiting for the state revenue forecasting committee to come back with its interim report that we've been promised. And in the meantime, we put some real optimistic revenue projections in there. I am very nervous that when you see the new revenue that you're going to, you know, you're going to need to understand and think about what that means for fund balance, what that means for potential expenses and revenues. And, you know, as we move forward, I think this is a year that things are in flux. So I've been working real hard to try to get that for you. I just seem to get waylaid every time I turn around this past week.
Well, we can't wait for it. Does anybody else have any questions before she gives us her town manager update? No? Okay, Sophie, how about a brief town manager update?
All right. My brief town manager update is first that we talked a while ago about WPCF. I came to you because WPCF submitted a grant for understanding the impact of climate change through DEP, and we were not originally funded, and we were really bummed about that, but they offered us this financial sustainability grant, and we decided that taking a loan for $100,000 to have $50,000 of it forgiven for something that we, while it might not be fancy, we kind of already had, wasn't an effective use of ratepayer money. So we decided that we weren't going to accept that grant. So we learned that the reason we didn't get the first grant was because there was limited funding, and it was only offered to those communities that also had a construction project that was going to be funded by the Maine Bond Bank. And lo and behold, the program got more money allocated to it, and they offered us a $20,000 grant with no matching funds to study the potential impact of climate change. So it will give us an opportunity to really evaluate our system and understand how climate change is impacting it and coming up with a plan for the future. So I'm really excited about that. The reason this is at workshop is just, I want to double check with folks because I need to accept these funds before your next formal council meeting. And I just want to make sure if I file the paperwork saying we'll accept it, that you will confirm it at the next council meeting. Yes. Joe is very excited about this. My second item is actually about Rob St. Louis. Unbeknownst to Chief Lowe and I, Rob St. Louis on his own time took the courses and passed all of the tests to be a code enforcement officer. So along with life safety, Rob St. Louis is now also a certified code officer. And I'm going to be asking you to appoint him as an alternate. He's got plenty on his plate. My concern is just if he gets pulled into duty on the code side, even inadvertently, and he's not formally appointed, that can cause him and us some problems down the line. So we're going to go ahead and do that. But if you see Rob or have a desire to send him an email and congratulate him, that is quite a feat, and we're wicked proud of him. Beyond that, I think I'm good. So my other update, Cindy, I think I want me to talk about the agenda on Wednesday. Actually, I think I can ask Jeff we can talk about hazmat on Wednesday.
Yep.
Correct? Yeah, we can
can.
talk about, yep. So we'll talk about hazmat on Wednesday, but we've revamped the agenda. I think the agenda might still say WPCF. I'm going to try to take that off if it hasn't been posted yet. And there is a discussion requested about how the community wishes to celebrate Pride Month. And then there's the follow-up to the public safety. That's what we've got. And my hope, if I get some time at my desk tomorrow, you might just have a nice overview of the budget that you might want to talk about as well.
Great. So we'll plan on a budget, a meeting for about an hour and a half or so.
I need to apologize. I'm only available due to childcare scheduling until just before 5 o'clock on Wednesday, but so I'll be.
See if we can be efficient.
That
Right.
Sophie, is the overview of the budget going to be delivered? Is that another?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was hoping if I could actually work at that tomorrow, uninterrupted for a little bit, I might actually be able to finish it. And then it's got some color and some numbers and some graphs. So I know that there are some counselors who would not want to just receive that electronically. I will post it in the Google Drive for folks, but I'll also have it delivered along with the hazmat budget.
Great.
Sound good?
Sounds good. Anyone else have anything? All right, then I will adjourn the meeting and we'll see you all on Wednesday.